There's a moment in everyone's life when they realize the world isn't as fair as they were taught to believe. But for Mariah, a young black woman in a world that seemed to thrive on prejudice, that moment came when she walked into a luxury hotel and was immediately mistaken for the janitor. Little did anyone know she would soon change the lives of some of the wealthiest people in the country, but not the way they expected. The real question is, how much does it take for someone to stand up when the system is built to keep them down? You won't believe what happens next. Mariah had always been a fighter. Growing up in a small, tight-knit neighborhood, she learned early that the world didn't always treat people who looked like her with the same fairness. But that didn't stop her from dreaming big. She worked tirelessly, earned a scholarship, and eventually landed a job at a prestigious hotel in the heart of the city. The glittering lights, expensive decor, and luxury clientele were a far cry from her humble beginnings, but Mariah was determined to prove she belonged. Every day, she walked through the hotel's grand lobby with a sense of quiet pride, knowing her hard work had brought her here. Yet no matter how hard she tried to blend in, something always felt off. People barely looked her in the eye. She overheard whispers, felt the subtle glances when she passed by. It was as if her very presence didn't quite fit. But she didn't let it get to her, until the day she entered the lobby and a wealthy guest mistaken her for the janitor. His condescending look made her freeze. Mariah didn't know it then, but that one moment would set off a chain of events that would force her to confront everything she'd been holding back. Something was about to change, but what? And at what cost? Mariah couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation as she walked to the back of the hotel, where the service staff waited. The encounter with the guest had been brief but cutting, like a slap she hadn't seen coming. She forced herself to smile, keep her head up. "He doesn't know you," she told herself. "He doesn't matter." But it wasn't just one person. Over the next few weeks, Mariah noticed more and more people making the same assumption. A colleague passed by her in the hallway one afternoon, nodding, as if to acknowledge her, but there was something in her eyes that said, "You don't belong here." The guests would ask her to run errands, even though her uniform clearly marked her as a manager. It was as if her very presence in the polished, upscale spaces of the hotel was a mistake. The straw that broke the camel's back came when the hotel's highest-profile event of the year was scheduled, a charity gala packed with influential people from all over the world. Mariah had worked tirelessly for months preparing the event. She'd made sure every detail was perfect, from the table settings to the guest list, the speeches to the decor. Her name was everywhere behind the scenes, but her face, it was nowhere. That night, as she rushed through the lobby, an elderly man in a tuxedo stopped her, looking over his glasses with a raised eyebrow. "Excuse me, miss. Where's the coat check? You seem to be busy?" His voice was more condescending than curious. "I can help you, sir," she replied. But before she could say more, a manager walked by and cut her off. "Mariah, come with me," he said, not even acknowledging the guest. Mariah's stomach dropped. Not again, but the worst part? No one had even asked if she was working tonight. They just assumed she was part of the background, someone to blend in and do the dirty work. As the evening went on, the tension in her chest grew. She'd done everything right. She'd worked harder than anyone. But it didn't matter. She was invisible to the people who mattered, as if her contributions were nothing more than part of the furniture. In the midst of the gala, she found herself standing in the kitchen, watching the world she was excluded from. She could hear laughter, clinking glasses, and the steady hum of conversation outside the kitchen doors. On the other side of that line, people were making decisions that would change the world, but she wasn't invited to even be part of it. Then it happened. One of the event coordinators, a woman Mariah had once considered a mentor, turned to her with a clipboard in hand. "Mariah, can you bring the coat check attendant a new set of tags? They've run out." Mariah's eyes widened. She felt her body heat up with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Is this what I am? Just a delivery person? She clenched her fists, but nodded, walking off without a word. She was halfway down the corridor when she heard the laughter of two executives she recognized. They were talking about the event's success, but their conversation shifted. One of them, a man in his 50s, with a thick accent said, "You know, it's amazing how they've kept the place running so smoothly, despite, well, you know, it's the little people who make it all happen." He laughed, and his colleague joined in. "If only they knew how to dress, huh?" Mariah froze. The insult wasn't even subtle. It was deliberate, meant to make her feel small, to remind her that despite the work she'd put in, despite the hours she'd sacrificed, she would always be the one who didn't matter, the one who was never supposed to be in these rooms, at these tables. She swallowed hard, her chest tight with anger. But as she stood there, invisible, something inside her snapped. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She wasn't going to let this continue. Not without a fight. She turned and marched straight to the hotel's upper management office. The door was open, and without knocking, she stepped inside, her voice steady but shaking with adrenaline. "I need to speak with you. Now." The moment she entered the room, everyone stopped. Silence. The head manager, a man known for his sharp eye and cold demeanor, looked up. "Mariah, what's the issue?" "You," she said, pointing directly at him, "have no idea who I am, and I'm tired of pretending I'm invisible." They all stared at her. This time, she wasn't backing down. The silence stretched, but she didn't flinch. Something had changed in her. The fight was just beginning. The room was silent. Mariah stood there, chest heaving, her words hanging heavy in the air. The weight of everything, the years of being overlooked, belittled, and dismissed, was now boiling inside her. The anger was no longer something she could keep down. She had always been the quiet, hard-working one, trying to fit in, trying to please, trying to show she belonged. But tonight, something inside her snapped. The head manager, still stunned, slowly stood up from his desk. "Mariah, you need to calm down. You're making a scene." A scene. That was all they saw her as. A disruption. She had been silent for so long, letting them define her place. No more. Her hands shook, but she raised her voice, louder this time, cutting through the tension. "You want me to calm down? You want me to be quiet and stay in my place?" Her voice cracked, but she held her ground. "How many times do I have to do the work of 5 people just to be seen? How many times do I have to put on a smile while you walk by and pretend I don't exist?" The room seemed to close in on her. All the years of pretending to be okay, of swallowing insults, of being the token employee, they crashed down on her. She couldn't breathe, but the fire in her chest pushed her forward. A woman from HR, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, shifted uncomfortably. "Mariah, we can talk about this later." "No," Mariah interrupted, her voice trembling, but filled with a newfound strength. "I'm done with later. I'm done with waiting. I've spent too long being invisible just to be good enough for you. No more." For the first time in years, she felt a surge of power, the realization that she wasn't the problem. She wasn't the one who needed to change. They were. They needed to understand the price of dismissing her, the price of making her feel less than human. But just as she thought she was finally being heard, the manager's cold words hit her like a slap. "You think you can just come in here and make demands? We'll have you removed from the hotel. This isn't how we do things." The words hit hard, but they didn't break her. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. If they wanted to silence her, they'd have to do it with force. And even then, she wouldn't back down. This was her fight now. With that, she turned and stormed out of the office, every step echoing in the empty hallway. What she didn't know was that she had just ignited something much bigger than she could have imagined. Mariah's heart raced as she stepped out of the office. She could feel the eyes of the staff on her, but this time she didn't care. The whispers, the judgment, they had no power over her anymore. She had taken the first step towards something bigger than herself, something that couldn't be undone. But as she walked away, she realized it wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. By the time the gala was over, Mariah had become more than just a staff member. News spread like wildfire about her confrontation, and it reached the higher-ups in the company. They couldn't ignore the courage of a woman who had been silenced for so long, and for the first time, she was truly seen. Days later, a senior executive approached her with a proposition that left her breathless, a position that would make her voice heard across the entire company. It wasn't just a job, it was a symbol of change. Mariah was being given the chance to do something no one ever thought she could. But as she stared at the offer, something gnawed at her. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every person who had ever been told they weren't good enough, every person who had been erased from history because of the color of their skin. Mariah realized the impact of her actions went beyond her personal story. She had become a beacon of hope for those who had been overlooked, the ones who couldn't speak for themselves. She took the offer, but not just for her own success. She took it for every person whose voice had been silenced, for every injustice that needed to be addressed. That day, Mariah didn't just get a promotion, she sparked a movement, a reminder that every fight for equality, no matter how small it may seem at the time, creates ripples that spread far beyond the moment. And with each ripple, the world inches closer to change. As she sat at her new desk, the weight of what she had done settled on her shoulders. It was a heavy burden, but it was one she would gladly carry. Because no matter how long it took, she was ready to fight for a world where no one was invisible anymore. And that fight, it had only just begun.